welcome to Whiskey and Whit. I'm Whitney, and today's video is going to be a set of neutral buffalo check Dollar Tree DIYs for Easter. I did something like this last year and you guys loved it. It is one of my top watched videos, so I knew I had to do another one. And honestly, I like these projects a little bit more than last year, so I'm so excited to share with you, so stay tuned. Up first is this adorable Farmhouse buffalo check bunny head. And I love that this is dual purpose. I added a hanger so you could hang it on your door, but you can also put it in a vignette on a shelf. For supplies, I ended up using my buffalo check fabric and this bunny head. I was gonna do something with the wreath, but I ended up scrapping it in the middle. And I wanted to let you know that I'm seeing more and more at Dollar Tree buffalo check fabric. So you could definitely make this full Dollar Tree. I just had this fabric left over from the fall, so I wanted to use it, but this is an option for you to find. So step one is to deconstruct the bunny head sign, and I did something similar for this for Valentine's Day, and I really like how it turned out with the fabric, so I wanted to do it again. Honestly, it's kind of a mess, so if you have an area where, you can easily clean it up, I would definitely suggest that, but the base is just so good. It's a good size, and it's plastic, so it works well with hot glue. It just takes kind of a little bit of time to get it unraveled. If you get the right end though, you're able to kind of unravel it around the different little spokes around the outside. So just be patient with it, and if you don't mind those little kind of fall offs, I would just cut the whole thing. So once that was done, I laid out my fabric and I just roughly cut enough on the outsides so then that way I could wrap it around the back. I also gave myself some guidelines, so then that way as I was pulling it taut, I was able to not just have a big square. So then I went through with my glue gun and started gluing the edges to the bunny. Now the kicker here is you want to make sure stuff overlaps enough that you're getting it really taut with the edge of the plastic frame, just so then that way when you flip it over, you're not looking at a blob, you're actually looking at a shape that looks like what's underneath it. So I cut some slits when needed, so then that way it fit into different kind of indents and things better, and that really helped. So I made sure I pulled it really tight, and then I held it for a little bit. Once you have most of your stuff glued down, then you can cut off some of the extra and glue down the ends. Honestly, I knew I was not going to look at the back of this, so I was not super clean with it. But honestly, my thought process with DIYs is if you're not going to see the back, I don't spend a ton of time making it pretty. If you want to do that and wrap the back, you can definitely do that, but that's just not my MO. So then once that part was done, I knew I wanted to add a bow so it matched a lot of the other bunnies that are currently in my house. So I just used some Dollar Tree wired ribbon and created a bow. I used longer tails so it covered the sign. I feel like the longer tails gave it a little bit more character. And then I wasn't satisfied with kind of how plain it was, so I decided to use some Dollar Tree burlap ribbon to go through and create the insides of the ears. So I really just freehanded this. You could definitely put the burlap on there and trace it. You could find a template online, but I just kind of wung it there. I cut it until it looked like how I wanted, and then I just added it with some hot glue. This dimensional piece I think was a game changer for this bunny. It definitely took it from a simple DIY to something that you would buy in the store, which I really like because the burlap definitely pops from the buffalo check, and it also adds that farmhouse look I was going for. And then I also used the pre-existing little hanger on the back because it was still popping out to add some jute twine so I could hang it when I wanted to. So like I mentioned before, you can hang it. It definitely looks cute within a wreath on the outside, but then you can also set it up in a vignette. I like that it's big enough to really create a statement, but it's not too big that it's overwhelming. And also it looks really cute with the next project that we're going to talk about, which are these mason jar kind of candlestick pedestals. So for project 2, you'll need some Votive candlesticks, some Kraft bottles, reindeer moss, and then I ended up using Easter eggs. I was going to use the little ceramic figures, but it didn't fit in my container when I tested it, which was really sad. So we got to pivot. So step 1, I made a set of 2 of these, so really it just depends on if you're making 1 or 2. I also grabbed 2 different sizes of the Votive candles because I did want the angled look. You could definitely do 2 of the same. Then I just went through, used some hot glue, and hooked the Kraft bottle to the stem. And I did this before I painted because I wanted it to look like one cohesive look. I wanted the brush strokes to be similar, but you could definitely paint them separately and then glue them together. Just make sure you don't put chalk paint where you're going to glue them because sometimes that will pop off. Then I added some painter's tape so I had a clean line at the bottom, and my goal here is to make it so the white goes up to that strip on the bottom of the mason jar, just so then that way that really makes it look like it's kind of one candlestick piece. I think that really helps finish off the look and makes it look clean. So after those dry, I wanted to add some jute twine to the bottom. I realized that my jar is not hooked here. I ended up having it pop off, so I had to add some additional hot glue, so make sure that it's completely set before you go like messing with it. But I just took some Dollar Tree jute twine, a little bit of hot glue, and wrapped it around and hooked it in certain places, so then that way the stem looked a little rustic and it broke up all of the white. Then my last step was to take some reindeer moss, get it into the Kraft jars to really kind of set up like a grassy look. And because my handy dandy clay pieces weren't working, I ended up using these speckled eggs I had left over from last year. I just ended up picking the robin's egg blue and the purple because that matches my decor the best, and it turned out super good. The last step was to add just a little bit of buffalo check ribbon, and I like this because you can honestly put whatever kind of ribbon that you want on there. You could do something way more neutral like a white or a burlap, or you could definitely use some of the pastel buffalo check ribbon that Dollar Tree currently has out. Up next is this Walmart dupe. So I saw this sign on somebody's Instagram and I was unable to find it in Walmart. And so I was like, you know what? I can make that with Dollar Tree supplies. And so step one was to dismantle the sign. What I wanted to do was make sure that those little feet were not going to stick out on either side. So I popped those off the front. And then after I did that, I gave the back 2 coats of Waverly chalk paint. And then up next was to paint the sign the black and white buffalo check. So I went through and did my technique you guys have seen me do countless times. You start going either horizontally or vertically. You use a little spacer piece of tape, go through, mark everything off, and then give yourself some vertical stripes. You want the painter's tape to match the width of the open space that you're painting the stripe. Once your lines are painted and it dries, then you're going to remove your painter's tape from that first round and set it aside because you're going to use it again later. And then you're going to go through and do the same thing, but horizontally or vertically, just the opposite of what you did originally. And then you're going to go through and paint it again. Once that dries, you're going to put the painter's tape right back where you had it before. I like to mark on those pieces of painter's tape that are on there where the white lines were. Most of the time you can see it, but sometimes you can't, and so those marks really tell you you're putting the paint in the right spot. Nothing's worse than thinking you're putting the painter's tape back where it originally was and you're putting it actually on the lines that you painted, because then you pull it off and it definitely doesn't look like buffalo check and you're very frustrated. Trust me, I've done that a few times and it is a huge pain. So then once all your black squares are painted fully, then I go through and pull off the painter's tape. You can let it dry a little bit, but I really don't like to let this dry completely with the tape on there, just so then that way you're not peeling off paint. It helps with it from bleeding as well. So then once your buffalo check base is done, you're going to create the scroll sign that goes on top of it. So I went ahead and measured my sign. So if you're using this specific Dollar Tree sign, it's about a 6x24 sign. So I wanted to make something a little smaller than that. So I went through with my Dollar Tree craft paper that I had left over from Christmas. You can buy these in their shipping section literally all the time. I cut a width of 24 and then I decided to cut it down just a little bit so then that way it was more pliable. And then I ended up measuring it again to get it to be the exact size I wanted. I also used my tape measure to draw straight lines for me to cut the length. I'm usually a pretty straight cutter if I have a guide. If not, if you've got a paper cutter or a rolly cutter and you're not trusting yourself to cut it straight, you can definitely do that as well. So then once my piece of craft paper was ready to go, I cut out this stencil on my Cricut, and this will be a free cut file down below per usual. Just click and you can download it and make the exact same sign. If you do not have a Cricut, you can definitely use the method that I've shown before with a pencil. So I will link my recent spring DIY video down below that shows you how you can print stuff out on your printer and create kind of a transfer method onto the sign. And it would be easy here. You could definitely just do that with a Sharpie. I also ended up using some really light transfer tape because you don't want anything too sticky because it's going to rip your paper. I will link my favorite place to buy vinyl and transfer tape down below. It's called Expressions Vinyl. You can get them on Prime on Amazon. It is amazing. So then once that's stuck on and you've got a little bit of room on each end, then I took some wooden dowels from the Dollar Tree and I used them to create some additional weight at the top and the bottom, as well as to give it that scroll look. So step one is to put a little bit of hot glue on your dowel rod, and then I stuck it to the paper scroll. Then I started rolling it a little bit, got it to the place I wanted it, and then I just took some more hot glue to secure it in place. Basically, the look you're going for is those things that they used to have back in like the medieval times where, hear ye, and they'd open it up. That's what you're looking for. So I decided to have both of them scroll towards the inside. And then I did that same rolling thing to the bottom of the sign, so then that way it looked like a scroll. And then I was ready to hook it to the sign. So to hook it to the sign, it's pretty simple. I laid it down where I wanted to and then just added a strip of hot glue underneath each dowel rod, so then if it was hot and kind of gave like that greasy look to the paper, you wouldn't have to worry about it. And then I tied on a little bit of jute twine to the top of the scroll to make it look like it was hanging. And then I stuck the hot glue on the top to make it really look like it was hanging from the sign. And then I didn't like how unfinished it looked, so I took that same burlap ribbon from the bunny head earlier and I added a bow there so it kind of all looked like it was in a matching set. My last step was to add some jute twine to the holes that originally existed from the sign, and then I was done. This is really cute to add to a gallery wall. I also love that this is one that you can hang up or you can lean somewhere. So if you've got a shelf, you can also do that. It's pretty versatile, and honestly, you could put whatever you want on the sign. So if you don't want it to be Easter, you could do spring, you could do farmhouse, general quotes that you can use year round. There are a ton of options. I'm really excited to see what you create. So if you are not a neutral buffalo check fan, I do have a ton of pastels on my channel. That seems to be the new trendy thing this year for Easter for 2020. So I've got all of that stuff. So I will link that down below if buffalo check is not your style, but you can also do some of these depending on the supplies that you use in the pastel colors. You guys know I am buffalo check through and through, and I was just so excited to get this video out for you. Quick disclaimer, because you watched all the way to the end, this video is pre-filmed, so I'm filming this right before my 39th week of pregnancy. So right now little man is still in there. I will share updates as they come, so you may know that he's here, and I might be talking about him still being in there. So that's literally just what happens when you have to pre-film videos when you're about to have a baby. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!